Yeezus, Yeezus, Yeezus. Let's talk about the genius of Yeezus. I put out a tweet asking for recommendations for YouTube videos to make, and Machine Gun Yorkie suggested the genius of Yeezus. We care a lot about Yeezus on Watching the Throne, a lyrical analysis of Kanye West. It was actually the album that got us to make the podcast. That's because as of 2015, when we first started the show, there was still a lot of Yeezus hatred. A lot. And we were really frustrated that not as many people recognized the narrative of it and that the album was actually telling a huge narrative story. So we spent a lot of time on the show talking about Yeezus. The whole goal was to build up to it, showing Kanye's development as a narrative artist from what he was doing on College Dropout up through, Late Registration, Graduation, 808s, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and eventually Yeezus. The thing we forgot was how many songs were in that. So going track by track has just taken a huge amount of fucking time. But we did it. We've covered all of Yeezus. We even wrote, and I bring this up so much, this book on Yeezus. It's pretty thick and goes track by track, giving a narrative, thematic, and sonic deconstruction of the album. So if you love the album, you'll love this book. You'll love this book. So I want to talk a little bit about the genius, just for anybody that hasn't listened to those episodes, that doesn't want to listen to those episodes, but is curious about what I might point to as making it such a great album. And the thing I'm going to point to is the narrative, which isn't the thing that everybody looks for in an album, right? And I think that's what's developed a lot of the old Kanye versus new Kanye dichotomy. Old Kanye seemed to be very focused on making the best music possible, in that classic sense that it's music that you just really want to throw on. It's catchy. It has some lyrics that are catchy, and it has a feeling that is either fun or emotional in some way that you want to keep coming back to. Where later Kanye stuff, he gets more into the art shit, right? Where everything is in service of the artistic purpose of the album, which gets into some pretentious, he's showing rather than telling. He's developing this whole universe on this album. And some people don't care about that shit at all. They just want the music. They want All Falls Down album after album, which would be great because All Falls Down is a great song. But there's also something that Kanye is able to accomplish when he makes a narrative album that you can't accomplish when you're just speaking on one track. So that to me is one of the things that makes Yeezus such a special genius album. Not an album for everybody, mind you. But I really do think that music is moving towards more art albums, more narrative albums than away from it. It got an initial push in the 70s and 80s in the rock genre. Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, The Who, The Beatles, they were all putting out these narrative concept albums. And hip hop has always had a narrative foundation, especially on the track level. But it hasn't been something where there have been a lot of big concept albums. And music in and of itself is not music. Music isn't a new art form. Music's one of the oldest art forms. But pop music is one of the newest art forms. Starting around in its current state, I believe it was the 40s. So we look at other art forms like movies, books, poetry, novels, poetry. You tend to have a dichotomy between entertainment and art. You'll have Steven Spielberg movies that are more entertainment with some depth, and then you'll have your Stanley Kubrick movies that have depth but aren't necessarily as entertaining to everybody. And then you'll have something out there that's just like pure, unadulterated entertainment, which is Fast and Furious movies or The Hangover, shit like that. And all those things are great, all cater to different moods and different audiences. One's not inherently better than the other. It's just, I think you see it in all those art forms that people start to fracture off into preferring one type over the other. And I think with music, especially with Kanye, we're starting to see that fracturing off into more of the artistic concept albums. And you see Kendrick going that route, J. Cole going that route, Travis Scott going that route. More and more artists are starting to put together those concept albums, as it's challenging. It's a hard thing to do. And I think it's one thing to make a song that's great, but it's another thing to make this album that's working from the first song to the last song and having that character development, the thematic developments. That's a real challenge, and it's a fun thing to do, speaking as a writer. So that's a genius to me. The long-winded genius of Yeezus is that what Kanye does on Sight sets up Bound 2. What he does on Black Skinhead sets up Bound 2. He breaks the album into 3 parts and uses a anti-hero's journey in the fact that it starts off with an unlikable protagonist, and through the course of the story makes us care about the protagonist more than what we did, and humanizes him, and eventually makes him heroic in some small ways. Heroic loosely used. But it's similar to Billy Madison, which is a comparison we make on the podcast all the time. Billy Madison starts with Adam Sandler as this very drunk degenerate who just indulges in the money that his rich, successful father has. And over the course of the movie, he develops into somebody likable, responsible, and eventually takes over his father's company. And it's comedic, but that's the same kind of journey that happens here. So Kanye on Sight, Black Skinhead, I Am a God, and New Slaves has the character in more of that negative space. From Hold My Liquor, I'm in It, and Blood on the Leaves, we get the humanization of that character as more of the vulnerability comes through. And we find out the backstory of why he was acting like such an asshole on the opening tracks. He's actually heartbroken. He suffered this loss of a girl that he was in love with. She got torn from him because she was in love with the limelight, and he hasn't felt right ever since. It sets up this dichotomy between the vulnerability that he's trying to hide from the world and the need for validation from the external world. And he acts on that in very indulgent ways, as we see in On Sight, in Black Skinhead, I Am a God. The ego is nothing more than a shield to not show anybody the pain that he's actually feeling. And then the last part of the album, Guilt Trip, Send It Up, Bound 2, is him finally over that pain and getting back into the world. Guilt Trip is the actual pushing away of it. Send It Up is him stepping back into that old life. The return to the beginning, which happens in so many movies and books. And he kind of looks around and sees that life as very superficial and dismisses it and moves on into Bound 2, where he starts to try to love again and have a relationship again. Somebody that was hurt and acting out over it, giving love another chance. And he's still not the perfect guy, right? You ever ask your bitch for other bitches, but he's trying. You know, he'll fuck her hard on the sink, but after that, give her something to drink. That's nice. That's polite. That's love. Anyway, that's the reason why I think this album's so genius, is not just that it has a narrative, but that it's showing more so than telling. And it takes a lot of hard work to show something rather than tell it. Like, I can tell you, you know, the Browns won the football game today. I can't believe the Browns fucking won a football game. But I can tell you the Browns won a football game. It was this score to this score. It's something different to describe the win to you, to describe the game and make you feel the emotions of the game, to put you in that time and place, to get you into that emotionscape. So I admire albums that show more so than tell, which is something with like Good Kid, Mad City, right? It's telling. It's really well done, and the soundscape's awesome. But when I compare it to Damn, like if I'm just talking like the narrative and the themes, Damn is way more impressive to me because Kendrick is showing more than he's telling. And it's funny that Damn is the album that most people think is Kendrick's weakest. They either think it's his best or they think it's his weakest. And that's because it's showing more than telling, and it's often harder to engage with works that show more so than tell, which is something that Yeezus does, which is why, you know, after 5 years, most people still don't realize it's a narrative album. But it is. And I hope with these things in mind, if you don't like the album or haven't listened to it in a while, you go back and give it a listen and pay attention to how Kanye develops the narrative, you know, and just, to highlight that first part a little bit more. And On Sight, he starts off at his most superficial, his most indulgent. Black Skinhead is him looking around at the culture and getting frustrated with the state of things and the racism and that nobody's doing shit. And he decides he's the one that can make change, which is what we get with I'm a God, him pumping himself up. That ego is swelling. He convinces himself he can do anything. And then he takes on the culture of America, which is consumerism and corporatism. And he calls out, like, we're the new slaves, let's revolt. Like, it's this attempted revolution that fails. And at the end of it, all he wants to do is get high. And we get that Hungarian outro, the lyrics to which translate to the sun being too tired and falling into a lake, and the world falling into darkness, and that being the state of things until this woman comes along and saves the sun and saves the world, which is what we see over the rest of the album. Kanye having fallen, or the Yeezus character having fallen at the failed revolution, goes into this depressive state and Hold My Liquor and I'm in It and Blood on the Leaves before finally coming out of it and meeting this woman that will lead him, hopefully, to better things. So that's the gist of it, and there's a lot more thematic stuff that the album brings up, especially with the end, and Jerome's in the house, watch your mouth. God, I could spend another 20 minutes just talking about that line in particular. So go back and listen to the album. I hope these things make you appreciate it more. You know, it may not be the easiest thing to throw on and listen to. It may not have the most clever, like, fun lines track to track, but what it's doing on the whole, how the bridge on Sight plays actually and foreshadows into Bound 2, that's some impressive stuff that's going on. And just how he's working the character and the character's psyche, it's really good. So do that. And, you know, if you want to buy the Yeezus book, I'd be so happy about that too, because I need to sell more of these things. It would be nice to make some money, you know? You can get those on Amazon. And they're filled with great art. And, you know, will change how you view the album. So that's that. I thank you for watching, and we're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers so we can monetize the channel. I'm so happy we finally hit 700, as we were at 600 for so long. It felt like forever. So thank you for the people that have subscribed. If you haven't, I would really appreciate you subscribing. And if you have requests for videos, leave them in the comments and I will make it. Thanks for watching. Until next time.